Hello, I am Paula Bennett and welcome to my New Zealand Herald podcast, Ask Me Anything. One thing I've learnt in life, it's never too late to learn something new. So on this podcast, I talk to people from all walks of life to hear about how they got to where they are and get some advice and guidance on some of life's biggest questions. Today, I have got my old boss in for a chat, Sir John Key. John joined the New Zealand Parliament in 2002, leader of the National Party 2006, before serving as Prime Minister from 08 to 16. Hi, JK.
Surprised you had to write that down. I would have thought it would have been tattooed on your arm or something.
Yeah, well, the dates. I'm getting worse at dates. Are you?
Aren't we all?
Yeah, that's good to know. That's good news. 2 rules for this podcast.
Yep.
Are you ready?
Yes.
And you should know this one. I can ask you anything.
Excellent.
But you don't have to answer.
Even better.
Quite good. And I call it the safe space.
Okay.
So my daughter and I, we go no judgy.
Right, okay.
So you can gossip about someone, but then you have to go, no judgy.
Yeah, as long as you don't get sued when you're gossiping. But yeah, okay, I'll do my best.
Okay, what's your, I'm going to do quick fire to warm up. What's your favourite meal to cook?
Favourite meal to cook? Roast chicken actually on Sunday night. Lemon chicken, nice and healthy, delicious.
Do you stuff the lemon in the cavity?
Lemon in the cavity, yep.
Yes.
Yep. And now it's just Brona and I because, the kids are either not around or, got a better option. And so usually it lasts for Monday night as well. And then that, like last night, which was Monday night, was chicken salad. How healthy is that?
Oh, that's good. And then what would be your go-to to order when you're out? No expense.
Love pasta. If you want me to plug a place, I don't want to do this because judgy, but then people are going to go there. Pasta Cura Mount Eden. Gabrielle's the chef. Best Italian food you'll get in New Zealand would be the way I would describe it.
Wow.
They're from Bologna, and it's an amazing restaurant. You walk in, the front page of the restaurant is there is no such thing as spaghetti bolognese, and you can't change anything on the menu, but the food is handmade and to die for.
And just yum. You're allowed a favourite place.
Yeah. Well, I love curry. I always go to O Calcutta and Parnell with Nina. She's fantastic.
Yeah, you love the curry.
There's just so many places I go.
But it's not, because you must have eaten some extraordinarily expensive food, with all respect, that most people would be out
been
of
to some great spots.
Yeah.
And I like ethnic food. Like, funnily enough, I'm going to India with ANZ, and I'm going to a restaurant called Bakara. So if you happen to find yourself just one day in Delhi, and who knew, and you say, where am I going to go for dinner? Go to a restaurant called Bakara. I tell you that because I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying it's Bill Clinton's either favourite restaurant in India for sure, could be favourite restaurant in the world. I went there when I was Prime Minister. Unbelievable food. And it's in this hotel, I think called the ITC or something. Anyway, amazing place. So I've eaten everywhere from the White House to the whatever, and big range, but simple.
Japan. I remember someone was going to Japan, and you
yeah.
just literally
It
was a random person that you met in the street, and they were going on this great, and you rattled off where they had to eat while they were there.
Drives Brona mad. Like when we go for a walk in the morning, I always go, which we often do. I go, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" She goes, "I have no idea, but you'll be thinking about food." And I go, "Yeah, I'm just talking about what we're having for dinner." And she'll go, "That's in 12 hours." I go, "No, I was thinking about tomorrow's dinner. I've got tonight's dinner already sorted, where we're going or what we're doing." So, I love food anyway, and I love going out. I like going out. I like cooking. I'm the chef in the house. So I love all that sort of stuff.
And you are busy, and we're going to talk a bit about that. But then that kind of gives you that sort of balance, isn't it? As the sort of having a bit more time to go out. Do you still get hassled when you go out? Do people approach you?
Well, hassled in a positive way. So in a negative way, I've only ever had 3 people in the entire time I've no longer been Prime Minister and haven't had security in that form. Full on like I used to. And only 3 people give me a hard time. None of them been particularly scary, if you know what I mean. If people don't like me, they just ignore me. I will say a reasonable number of people ignore me, but if they don't like me, they ignore me. But for the most part, people are fantastic. They either say, "Come back, wish you were there, loved your time," or "Can I have a photo?" If we go out for dinner, we'll get a few people come over for a photo from time to time, but depends where we go. If it's a place we go all the time.
Most people respect that you're having time with Brian and kind of leave you to that, people I find as well. Yeah.
They're great. And then look, and then there's a little bit sometimes you'll check in somewhere or do something now and they won't know me at all.
Yeah.
So, if particularly, it depends if they're younger or they're a migrant, maybe, because you can't always assume, I always come and go, often I'll go, hi, I'm John Ken. They go, yeah. But it might be that they're new to New Zealand. I mean, why would they know?
And you like me, like when people go, I never be a politician because, people are so awful and it must be the worst job in the world. And I would say, actually, I see the best in people, not the worst.
Yeah.
Because as you say, people are pretty amazing. I still have it that particularly women it is for me that will go out of their way to approach me and say thank you or we miss you but then a bit like you, I think I kind of got my timing right.
Yeah.
Leave while they still want you a little bit.
Yeah, you leave while they still want you, yeah. Better to go when they want you to stay than stay when they want you to go. Look, I think the thing with politics is that there are a couple of things. One is that you have the real capacity to make change. So people can say, well, I always used to say to people, beware of the person who comes up to you to a party on Saturday night and says, mate, I don't care about politics, because they'll spend the next half an hour telling you how to run the country. So trust me when I tell you they do care. So you can influence big change, and in so much that, life is about making a difference, and that can be to your family, to yourself, to other people, your community and your country. And I think, when I finally am no longer here, I think, right or wrong, there'll be people look back and they'll critique all sorts of things, good and bad, they've done, but they will be critiquing it in some form or another. And that's way better, I think. And that's what I always used to say to young people, there's nothing wrong with trying and failing. There's just something terribly wrong with not trying. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think that's been the big thing, is that I'm grateful that I was there, but I have no regrets for being there.
Yeah. And let's talk then a little bit about the effect on the family, because I've had Max in, as you know.
Yes.
And had a great chat. I ended up being Auntie Paula and giving him some great advice,
exactly.
Yeah. I tried my best for you,
Good.
John, honestly. But, and he's talked recently about the toll that he felt it took. So how did you balance letting him be himself and be young, but equally protecting him in some respects? And you must have felt a real sense of responsibility in that.
Yes, he did. When he came out with this, something about hating me at a certain point, he did text me because I was on a plane about to fly somewhere with don't worry about the Herald, because he always calls me Jan. He goes, don't worry about the Herald, Jan, and I still love you. So I said, oh yeah, whatever. It's all good. I understand completely. Anyway, what teenager doesn't go through various patches where there are times, it doesn't matter who mum and dad is.
Completely. It's almost healthy to have but look, he felt something.
Yeah. I think, I think there's no getting away from that. There are aspects of, you choose the job, they don't choose that. And so they're kind of, dragged along. And there's some great things about that. And I used to have discussions with Max, probably more than Seffi actually, because she was overseas by then, about, hey, do you think this has been a good thing or a bad thing? And he would always say, on balance, for the most part, absolutely a great thing. But yeah, like anything, he would collect and does collect sometimes flack and things, which not necessarily everyone would get. And so, sometimes it's self-inflicted. Sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it's blatantly unfair and not true. But I used to look at his social media, and I don't read the comments on social media. No, so when people write hate comments, they're really wasting their time because I'm not seeing them. But I say to him, don't read that stuff. And you go, oh yeah, I just ignore it. But I think some of it does seep in a little bit. So that's the negative of it, and we live in that world now.
So how do you protect from that then? I
think the answer is you can't really, and because ultimately, it's not just as simple as saying, well, I won't be a politician then, what happens if you're a business person? What happens if you're an artist? What happens if you're anything? I mean, a sports person, there's can be literally anything. You can be the local principal of the school. I mean, people will have a view and express that view. So look, I don't know. All I think you can do is do your best as a parent. There is no perfect playbook when it comes to being a parent. I think you have to do the things that you are required to do. Unconditional love, a combination of encouragement and reinforcement. Sometimes you are the person that has to set the rules. They won't always love every decision that you make. Max said in that interview, actually, he thought I was quite hard on him, and I always thought I was quite soft on him. Yeah. And so I worried about being too soft on them sometimes. So it's a funny thing. You see what you see at the time. But that, again, and I think every parent goes through this. Every parent thinks, am I getting this right? And every child is different. So sometimes in a family of 3 children, 2 can be absolute angels doing something and one might go off the rails or whatever, Who knows? It's not perfect. But again, I don't think it would stop me. If I had my time all over again and I thought through and understood a little more clearly or maybe thought more deeply, would I not do it? I think the answer is, if I'm really being honest, I would do it, which feels a bit selfish, but I would still do it because there was just such a massive drive within me to want to be Prime Minister that I think I would have done it.
Yeah. I put my family through the ringer with it, and as you say, they didn't sign up to what I did. No. And they would always say the fact that you are able to instigate such big change outweighs it. You know what I mean? Like we think we think you and what you're doing is extraordinary, so we'll take a few of the blows. I do say to my husband that you wouldn't have had this problem with Brona because I know she's only sort of a 1 glass of wine. Yeah. The odd time Alan would be going, I'm after work, and I go, do you want me to come pick you up or make sure you get an Uber? And he'd go, no, I'm only going to have 2 beers. And I'd go, just remember the headline in the Herald will be, my husband is a dickhead. If you get done for TIC, the bad news is, buddy, you're in the paper. She's definitely 1 glass. And the bad news is, buddy, I'm backing away.
No, that's right. And then everyone's challenges say, look, no, I think it's all fine. I mean, for Brona, the hardest thing for her really is that she definitely is sort of philosophically, she's sort of shy when you first meet her, but not actually when you get to know her. So she does not want to be in front of the camera and would happily have never had a day in front of it. But on the other side of the coin, actually did it really well. And I think a lot of people really liked that. Yeah. And but I think these things are hard for anyone. I mean, there's lots of, in so much I accept in the modern world, parenting is very a shared responsibility, but there's still enormous pressure on women, I think, ultimately mothers and the role they play. And I just see it as chairman of ANZ, there is some of our staff, I think, who would feel guilty about coming into work. They shouldn't, but they would. But on the other side of the coin, their family needs the income. They want the job that they're doing, all of those kinds of things. And so it's like all those things. Are you doing the right thing by your child or the wrong thing? And the answer is, well, at one level, you're showing your children the very things that you and I would believe in, the core values of the National Party, that through your own hard work and enterprise, you can change your life. So on the one hand, they come away, and I think in our case, both of our children have a high work ethic. So therefore, they've learnt that from us, but on the counter, we haven't always been there for every single bit of it. And so that's the trade-off everybody sort of gets. And I think, to be fair to Jacinda, I remember at ANZ a couple of times, I had a number of women that came up to me and who were bluntly national supporters who said it's kind of lovely that Jacinda's had a baby and she's in office and she can go to work because it sort of gives me permission to go to work. And I actually get that. I totally understand that. So, it's life.
I can remember my daughter throwing a tantrum at that 11 or 12 years old when, hormones are all over the place and they're not sure they are, and, and her hating me for a minute there. And I said to her, well, this will give you, remember this moment so you've got something to talk about in counselling. Hold on to it. I'm going to screw you up somewhere along the line. So this is a good one for you to... No, exactly. Hey, we must touch on, because people are interested. So, I mean, you've touched on how busy you are, but then there's a bit of helicopter in there, isn't there? There's a bit of golf in there. Chairman of ANZ, taking up a bit of your time, still on the board in America. So tell everyone what you're kind of doing, because there is that interest.
So I'm chairman of ANZ and on the ANZ Group board. That's probably as one institution the most time-consuming things I do. But equally, I'm on Palo Alto Networks, largest cybersecurity company in the world in Silicon Valley. I'm on a little company called Oratain, which is a great New Zealand story. And then a lot of what I do is I advise companies mostly on China. So big multinationals, and I advise them on China, and they are global companies like, a Comcast or, a BP or whatever. Yeah.
And so, do you see yourself slowing down more, or do you just think, because you've still got a lot on your plate, right?
Yeah.
How do you kind of balance it all, or it doesn't matter?
Well, I've just got to learn to say no to friends who ask me to go on podcasts, and I'll be fine. Okay. That'll be good, and then I'll have more time. No, look, I definitely do. I mean, I'm 62 this year, right? And I'm vague. I remember that, talk about get the lawyers out, I'll probably get sued, but because one of them is one. I remember Chris Finlayson and Tim Grosser being in my office one night when I was Prime Minister, and I was on the phone talking to someone. They were sitting on the couches on my office on the ninth floor, and they were having this discussion about how great it was going to be because they were going to die at work because they loved their work so much that they'd be there when they were 90. And I walked over and said, "Oh, you two need to get a life. I'm going to be on the golf course or Maui or somewhere, I don't know, but certainly not at work." So I still hold strongly of that view, which is, I'm not going to work forever. I am going to do less stuff over time. It's hard because the things you get offered are great. But ultimately, I've sort of come to the conclusion that sort of says, look, I hope that I live till I'm 100 or 90. I just hope as long as I live, I'm healthy. So, there's an argument that if you're 85 and you die, but you die really healthy at 85, that's way better than, maybe being in a terrible position
another 10 years.
10 years. Yeah. But on the basis that you do, it's not straight line. And I think we all sit around as human beings thinking, I'll be able to do absolutely everything at 90 I can do that when I'm 60 and at 30 and at 10. And the answer is you can't. So for the next 20 years, they're going to be, I'm hoping, touch wood, great years for Brona and I and the family. And so I want to be able to use that time to fly helicopters or play golf or travel and things. So I'm definitely going to work, but I'm not going to work.
I did try on grandbabies for you in Max.
Stage,
so,
good luck. But at some point.
Okay, we're going to come back in a moment because John's given me a lot of advice over the years, and it's time for him to give you some. John, you've been incredibly successful in your life, and I sort of want to focus a bit on that and then some advice for people about the country and where we're at and what it might look like as a New Zealander in 10 years' time. But I scribbled down here that I thought perhaps your biggest success was your marriage and your marriage to Brona. Well, and I don't mean it glibly because it's tough in Parliament, right? We have seen plenty of colleagues whose relationships have not survived, and I know you always, you would say to me quite often that you will measure your success in Parliament and make sure that you have maintained your relationship.
Yeah, when I went into Parliament, one of the ex-ministers said to me, it's an interesting place. If you go in there with a strong marriage, it'll have its challenges like everyone does, but it'll survive. And if you go in there with some obvious fractures in the marriage, it'll definitely get blown apart. And I think that's right. I think, for the most part, it soaks up so much time and it's so consuming that inevitably you're asking, your partner to really, suck it up and take some, take one for the team.
And it's all about you.
Yeah. And
respect.
And it's difficult because, I'd go out and do something good, bad or stupid and, Brona would be copping it going, well, why is your husband doing these things? And it could be on absolutely anything. Some of them she may not even necessarily feel terribly well qualified to talk about the merits of TPP and whether we're selling democracy out, which, by the way, we weren't. But, all those kind of things. And so it's not easy. But, I mean, one of the great things, there are many, many great things about Brona, but one of them, she's a fantastic mother. And so she really, she went to everything for the kids, did everything for them. And so, I think while they could probably make a very strong case that I wasn't there for lots of things, although I did make an effort to go to as much stuff as I could and went to a lot more than they might always remember, she was there for absolutely everything. And that glue is really important, again, when you're under the spotlight. It's difficult. So, it's been a great thing, and we've been married for 40 years next year, actually.
Wow.
So
we both have come from reasonably sort of humble beginnings, if you like, in their own different ways. And there'll be people out there, and we certainly see, and we've both seen a lot of suffering. And we see it now as well. But, that sort of advice to people, do you really think that, people, not everyone can be Prime Minister.
No.
But moving yourself out of a tough economic situation and into something more, what do you think the keys to that success are?
Well, I think you have to have a decent education if you can, and I think you have to be determined. In really simple terms, better than anyone else as a former minister, very successful minister of social development, that the fastest pathway out of poverty is work. And as Michael Joseph Savage said when they brought in the benefit in 1935 in that government, it wouldn't be an armchair ride to prosperity. That's what he told Parliament. And the tragedy is that well, he's right. It most certainly isn't. Is at best subsistence living, and the problem is that you can't fix that through the benefit because you can probably never get it up enough. And often people that are on a benefit are also, they might have gone through all sorts of issues, so they may well have debt that's there and all sorts of things that are going on. So it's really, really tough for them. But what we do know is if you are working, then it doesn't mean that you can't be doing it hard, but you'll still be doing it a lot better than you otherwise would.
Yeah.
So the question is, what does it take to get a job? And the answer is, in the modern labour markets, these are the best conditions we've ever seen. But there's no question that ultimately, to change my life, a lot of what really helped that was getting education.
Your mother really valued an education.
Yeah, well, Mum was a massive driver on education. So I remember when I came home, like all children do, when I was 15 and 16, and said, right, I'm going to leave school and do something else. Well, in this case, it was train horses. That was crazy. Anyway, she said, no. And I said, well, let's have a discussion about it. She went, no. That was it. There was no discussion. And it wasn't just I was going to university, by the way. I was going to university to do accounting and economics. They were the only topics allowed. It was unbelievable. But on the other side of the coin, she'd come out and, Austria invaded by the Nazis, ended up in the UK, ended up with a husband that died when I was 5 or 6. And so had seen her life completely ripped into pieces and had realised that in life they can almost take anything away from you, particularly coming from a Jewish family in Austria, and a wealthy Jewish family, by the way. But the one thing they can't take away from you is education. And then the thing I would add to that is drive. And I think I was always very pro, as you know, on migration as Prime Minister. And the reason was that I will always have an undying respect for migrants that come to New Zealand because they give up a lot. They give up the culture, the family, the things that they leave behind. Sure, they make, they do that for their own reasons, but hugely it's just they almost sacrifice their own life for their children. And we're a much better country from it, and they're hugely determined. So again, I'm sure there'll be other people that can point to me that I'm wrong, but are there many South Africans on the dole? Last time I looked, I don't think so.
No.
Are there many Indians and Chinese that aren't working? Last time I looked, no. I mean, the local Indian restaurant that I talked about, their children have done amazingly well. One of them's a lawyer. He's still working in the restaurant at nights because that's what you do in that kind of family business.
Yeah.
I mean, I just have a lot of respect for people that want to move the dial themselves. And you see it all the time, youngsters that arrive here and they might be at Auckland University and they barely can speak English. In 5 minutes they're at the cafe down the road waitressing or doing whatever. And so you have to want to move that dial. And that doesn't mean that everyone that doesn't is lazy or something, but there is just no simple way out of it unless you're prepared to do it yourself.
And don't we want something more for our children? But we are seeing so many New Zealanders now that are literally intergenerational.
It's
terrible. It is. But I mean, Alan and I, my husband and I, were talking the other day, we're having a glass of wine out on the deck and we were sort of having a conversation, and I was ranting about his and my children and just going, they're taking up too much of our time and we're supposed to be, and he said it's because we spoil, we want more for them.
Yeah.
He said, you're right, we need to put ourselves first for a while and, just say no to moving furniture all day Saturday or, and it was silly things like that, what I mean? And then we had a real conversation about how much you want more for your own, right? Or it's something different. But it just does feel like there's a lost generation there at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things in there. I mean, intergenerational welfare dependency is terrible. We're getting into third and fourth and generations and where no one in the households work. So what role models are there? What do those children learn? The answer is they learn from what's around them. They're a product of that environment, and that really is just dire and disastrous. On the other side of the coin, equally, let's say your children do come from a well-to-do background or a better-off background. They have some great advantages, but maybe they don't see the same struggle that maybe you and I grew up with. But you can't replace that. I mean, there's no point in saying, well, shame on Max because he thinks a holiday is one that you take a plane to Maui. Well, he does, but he didn't again, he didn't choose me to be Prime Minister, he didn't choose that. I wanted to go to Maui on holiday for Christmas, so I took them there. And so, and again, I'm not sure that there's any point in me beating myself up or saying he doesn't understand hard work in the same way I do because he thinks a holiday's in Maui. Well, he's a product of the environment. So it's good and bad. But I do desperately worry that in a time where you've had incredibly tight labour markets, like literally you can get a job under almost any circumstances. If you just want to get one, you'll get one, that more and more people have poured onto a benefit of some sort.
Yeah.
And I accept that there are all sorts of things from mental health issues right through to, other issues. And I accept it's really tough, but it's just going to remain tough forever if they're on a benefit. That's the blunt reality.
And education is the pathway out, and we do have a great education system if you're going to school. If you're turning up,
I can't
and
understand
the most part it is.
Yeah, I can't understand the truancy issues. No. And I just don't understand. Those numbers seem frighteningly large to me, and I just don't know if they're real or because stats can be blown around all sorts of ways. But let's just argue for a moment that they're correct. The numbers I see on TV and stuff. Again, you have to ask the question why. Now, maybe some of it's COVID, maybe it's other different reasons. I can't give you an explanation. But again, if you are not at school and not in education, man, there are real serious problems coming. And our kids compete in a global world.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not just competing with the youngsters that are in their class. They're competing with students that might come to New Zealand. They're competing for places on the world stage if they want to go there. There's all sorts of things going on. So I don't know. And I do worry about some of the parts of New Zealand that have the highest, instances of deprivation, the far north, Gisborne, the East Coast. And then I look at the numbers of children reported to be not at school. That is just a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we wouldn't do it now, but I remember once getting a phone call from the school and them saying, Anna's got a really sore throat and so you need to come pick her up. And they said, well, she said that she told you that this morning, but she must have got that wrong or else you wouldn't have sent her. And I was like, oh, too right, I would have sent her. Although if you can walk, you can get there.
Yeah, I remember when Steffi was about 7 and we were living in London and she was in bed one night. It was about 7:30 and we were going out for dinner. It was Saturday night. And anyway, we had the babysitter and she'd turned up and everything was good and we'd tucked her in and she was sitting there in bed and she had this sort of rug over the thing and she said, my stomach hurts. And I said, I think you just worry about mummy and daddy going out for dinner. We're going to be back in a couple of hours. And the baby says she's lovely and she's going to be there. She says, no, my stomach's hurt and hurts daddy. And I said, no, honestly, we're back pretty soon. She said, no, my stomach hurts. And I said, look, if your stomach hurts and you're really going to vomit like you say, why don't you do it right now? So she did. all over the bedspread. At which point I said, we're not going for dinner. So, maybe sometimes you should listen to them.
I was going to say call your bluff, but maybe sometimes it really is. So, that advice for success, and let's be honest, you've done big things. Is it about goal setting as well? I mean, you always innately had that ambition to be Prime Minister, and you've talked about that in the past. What advice would you give to people that perhaps do have big dreams and how they need to follow them?
Visualization. I think you've actually got to imagine yourself being in that role. And I say to people, I think I'm completely crazy, but I was leader of the opposition for 2 years effectively, and I used to get up every morning and go, let's say it was 200 days to the election, I'd go, in 200 days' time I'll be Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And it's not about being arrogant or being silly, but unless you ultimately believe you can and will be and demonstrate that in the way that you carry yourself and the things you do, you most certainly will not be. And I think, for all these great sports stars and stuff, and that's why I think particularly see it with sports stars, there's a very fine line between the brilliance on whatever they play or do and arrogance. And sometimes they're not the most lovable people. And I've met some of them. Some of them are the most down-to-earth, incredibly humble people. Richie McCaw's in that camp. Yeah. Dan Carter's in that camp. But actually, there's some of them are not that nice. But then you sit there and you go, but you know what? it's partly because in their head, to get to where they've got to, they've had to think the certain way. So I don't always hold it against them.
No. Sometimes it's more the individual sports aspect as well.
Totally,
and the team, all you're relying on is you, right?
Yeah. And
and good or bad that day, it's all in your... I remember Sarah Walker, and I know that you met her a number of times, and I remember her telling me one day that you gave her some great advice, but she had this wonderful one, and her thing is, your subconscious doesn't know the difference between a lie or the truth.
Yeah.
So if you tell it something every day, even if you don't believe it in the beginning, you will eventually, and actually you will consciously be working towards it because your unconscious doesn't know whether you're telling it the truth or not. So tell it what you want it the truth to be. You are driven, you will win, you are, and do it often enough, and it kind of you start carrying yourself like it.
Well, Tiger Woods was the obvious. Grew up with a father who was, very, very quite a difficult background, obviously, and the father was ex-military and, kind of very much kind of ex-Green Beret type thing. And so he would just do extraordinary things. I mean, they effectively thought Tiger was brilliant and they made him brilliant, but most of all, they made him mentally strong. So he'd scream at him in his backswing. He'd make him sink 500 putts, and if he missed one, he'd have to start again. I mean, just kind of insane things at one level. But at another level, what happened was it made Tiger this not lovable guy because he was very insular and very kept to himself, and just all the pros would practice at one end of the driving range, he'd practice at the other end, all this stuff. But on the other side of the coin, he won so often because his sheer presence beat other people. They didn't think they could win. It's actually one of the risks the All Blacks might have at the moment. The All Blacks have been effectively the highest winning franchise in the world for decades and invincible. They won so many games in the last 10 minutes because they were a little bit fitter, and they always believed until the hooter was blown they could win.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem they've got at the moment is, and not so many teams have beaten them in recent times, the question is, do they still carry that fear factor in the other teams? I still suspect yes, but it's going to be challenged. And do they believe they're going to win? And again, if they do, they can win the World Cup this year, and if they don't, they most certainly won't. So you've got to have that. You just got to have the faith, Yeah. You've got to believe you're going to win, and we know that in political parties because polling and that, it's all great, it makes you feel good and being out there and stuff. But unless you believe you're going to, you're never going to.
Yeah. And your future's not predetermined.
Not at all.
The boy that grew up in a state house, the 17-year-old solo mum, actually in this country in particular, it's pretty incredible that you can, through hard work and doing some of that work on yourself, actually see a level of success that you may not have imagined when you were younger.
Yeah, and I think you just look at it. I mean, sometimes I'd go around when I was Prime Minister, I'd look at every honours board in a school and look at who was ducks or whatever, and I'd look at the names and I'd go back, 20, 30 years, and I'd go, okay, how many of those do I recognise? And the answer was very few. Now, that doesn't mean they haven't gone on to be successful. They may be brilliant lawyers or doctors or whatever, and something I don't necessarily understand that field or know it or whatever. But so the people that you always think are going to be successful, they aren't always, and sometimes you don't think will be. I mean, look at Graham Hart. I mean, if your definition of success is making an extraordinary amount of money, then there isn't anybody in New Zealand and very few in Australasia and very few in the world that have beaten what Graham's achieved. But Graham was a tow truck driver, I think, when he first started. Now he's a very smart guy and he's got an MBA and, talk about humble. That's the guy that's humble. And a remarkable person. But, man, you wouldn't have written it off the script, would you?
No.
So he did it. And there's so many like that, really. And that was one of the things I used to get a lot of. And it's one of the things, when it's not the topic of the day, but, this latest round of bashing of rich people. I mean, seriously, is the problem in New Zealand that we've got too many rich people? Last time I looked, we don't have enough. I mean, because rich people can't help themselves. They just spend a ton of money. I mean, that analysis was so pathetic. I don't even know why they bothered publishing it, frankly. But I know what my taxes are, and I know I was on that list because I was made to fill it out. And I know there was a hell of a lot more wealthy people that are not on the list that are a lot wealthier than we are. But I know how much nominal tax I pay, and the answer is a truckload. So, yeah, when 2% of people are paying a quarter of all personal tax and 25% are paying, or 20% are paying about 70% of it, well, if that's not enough, what is enough? And last time I looked, we want people with ambition doing things, hiring people. So that was a lot of what I tried to do when I was Prime Minister. I tried to build ambition, and make New Zealand, that was why our slogan was always ambitious, and have New Zealand proud of the fact that we were the rock star economy and that we were punching above our weight and that we were going to win, and it wasn't just the All Blacks. And it was like the infamous changing the flag. It was nothing to do with what was actually on the flag. It was about, can we find something that we can all coalesce around that makes us feel good about being a Kiwi, and we're happy to show it in the way the Americans do, and actually even frankly the Australians do, or the Canadians do, or other people do. So I think you build that national psyche of ambition, and I do worry that in the last while that's starting to seep away. And I tell you, you look at that win that New Zealand got in terms of pathway to citizenship in Australia. I can't think of a bigger foreign policy win for a government other than a free trade agreement with America, and we had that until Donald Trump ripped it up with TPP, and in 12 hours that got turned around to, with the last person out, turn the lights out. And that shows you how negative the sentiment is at the moment, and that worries me. And I think it worries me because, like I say, we've just got too many people like David Parker who just thinks the problem in New Zealand is some people are successful, instead of getting to the core root of the problems, which are we've got hundreds of thousands of people for a variety of reasons locked out of labour markets, not working, all these other things. And how do we transform their lives? Let's focus on that than worrying about chasing a few people out of the country.
Oh, get me ranting on that one. Yeah. I mean, most of them use fewer public services than most New Zealanders, so they'll send their kids to private schools. They'll pay for a private operation next week if they need one, and not actually clog up the public system. They employ so many people. They run successful businesses. They pay tax via their businesses and everything else, and PAYE, and they're ambitious and
they're incredibly generous.
Gosh.
What you don't see is you don't see them wanting to have their name there everywhere because basically they don't want to be seen. I mean, okay, I looked at the list of that 90 people, and I'm happy for them to write to me and tell me I'm wrong, but that 90 people who want to pay more tax, first thing, knock your socks off. Just write your check to IRD. But the second thing is, how many of those people are actually on the list making donations, big donations to all of these other charities? Well, I tell you what, I didn't recognise many of the names, and yet the people that are on the rich list, every time I go and do an event like you do, they're the people putting their hand up, giving and giving and giving. It's crazy. And sure, people will say they can afford it, but like I said, what's our problem? I don't think our problem is that we've got those 400 people on the rich list.
Absolutely. Okay, so the podcast is called Ask Me Anything. Yeah. This is your chance to ask me something if you would like to. You mustn't have anything you need to know.
Well, I know myself. I'll tell you what I will ask you. Is your life better, and do you think people treat you differently because you've lost so much weight?
Oh, I'm definitely healthier and fitter. And it's amazing how much brain space it takes up when you're big. Like you look, will this chair hold me well, or do I need to hold myself up a bit so that I'm in a plane, I need to physically hold my arms in because I'm so conscious that I'm spilling onto the person next to me. And so that is actually a lot of muscle and a lot of thinking.
Energy,
a lot of energy. I remember once I need to walk from KPMG to X. Okay, if I go that way at steps, I'm likely to be sweaty and I don't want to be when I turn up. Or do I take more steps and go around the path, but it's going to take me longer? And what a lot of headspace.
Yeah.
An awful headspace, right? Yeah. And so,
because it's hard, eh?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter, people go on about, I saw it in Parliament, a number of our colleagues that had bariatric surgery, right? That doesn't mean anything. I mean, Chester Burrows had it.
Tatiana,
and
they're all public.
And it basically doesn't mean you're going to lose weight. You can break all that stuff. I mean, you actually initially you'll absolutely lose weight, but as soon as you're back eating again, if you don't mentally want to get in the right space, you'll gain weight.
I'm really conscious of it at the moment.
It's hard. It's
really
hard.
of it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think a bit about my weight. I try, like Brian and I always go for walks. We do a reasonable amount of exercise. We don't excessively eat carbos. I probably drink a bit too much, according to, the recommended thing, but it's not crazy amounts. But I do think about it because I just sort of think when I lose a tiny little bit of weight, I do feel a little bit better. I think it's mental. Yeah. I mean, do I look a lot different if I'm 88 kgs and not 90 kgs? In physical numbers, it's tiny, but I feel better for it.
Yeah. So no, I definitely feel better. I love fashion, so clothes are easier to wear, actually a bit cheaper because you can shop anywhere and you're not having to go there. And I think people treat me differently, but then I think that's also kind of the, I'm trying to age disgracefully, so I currently got a mohawk and I'm growing I'm growing a mullet.
It's a mohawk, is it?
Yeah, it's kind of a mohawk and I'm growing a mullet.
Well, at least you got here, I'm running.
Yeah, and so, I think there's just sort of some of that. Okay, here we go. We are out of here because you've got to go and save the country and do something, and I've got to go and feed.
I'm giving a speech actually, which just before people get too excited, I'm getting paid very well for it. But I did say to the guy, don't give me the money, give it to the cyclone relief. Yeah. So that's a nice thing. So they're making a really nice donation. They're a great company, and they're making a nice donation.
And that give back is, it's a really nice stage and part of life.
Look, it's easy for both of us, really, to be honest. I can talk underwater, and they're a great company and they're very successful. So works for both of us.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for fitting us into your insanely busy schedule. I definitely really appreciate it, so thank you. I hope that you've all got some advice or inspiration and perhaps see your own journey to success or how you can help your children or people that you care about around you as well. If you've got any questions or feedback for the podcast, you can get in touch with me by emailing askpaula@nzherald.co.nz. Find me on Facebook, Instagram or LinkedIn. Make sure you follow Ask Me Anything on iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also read my weekly column in the Herald on Sunday. I'm Paula Bennett. Ask Me Anything. Goodbye.